Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. So while I'm waiting on the next Simon Says stamp kit to arrive, I thought I would sort of create my own card kit. And I'm going to do 10 cards using the new Pebbles and Jen Hatfield homemade collection called Patio Party. I did do a quick look for you about 2 weeks ago, I think, on the paper pad as well as the ephemera set. What I've done here is I've grabbed one of each of the pattern papers from the 6x6 paper pad. That's a total of 18. And then I also have 2 of the scrapbooking pages that were not patterns included in that 6x6 paper pad. And I've taken 2 of those and trimmed out 6x6 inch pieces of that. I'm going to also be using the ephemera set as well as that sticker sheet that I showed you with those plaques on them. And then I've got 3 stamp sets from my stash that I'm going to use to create these. So the first stamp set that I'm using is by Reverse Confetti. It's called A Friend Like You. The second one is by Ellen Hudson and it's called Spa Day. And then the third one I'll bring in is also by Ellen Hudson called Mirror Mirror, and it's made to coordinate with the Spa Day stamp set. I also added in 5 cardstocks from MFT. Cool as a Cucumber, Razzleberry, Green Room, After Midnight, and Lemon Drop. So let's jump into card number 1. What you just saw me doing there was dyeing some Ranger texture paste. I used just an old sheet of acetate, and I'll take whatever ink I'm going to be using. This today is Lawn Fawn Freshly Cut Grass as well as Minty Fresh, and I'll just press that onto the acetate to get a little bit of the ink out there. Then I use my palette knife and I will mix in some texture paste with that until I get a color that I like. Then I took that paste and I just spread that across a scrap piece of Neenah cardstock, and I'm going to set that aside to let it dry. I have the coordinating die set that comes with the Spa Day stamp set, and I'm going to use the mask that comes with that to cut out of this texture paste. I wanted to give it sort of the texture of a facial mask that we would use, so that it didn't just look that it was colored or a colored piece of cardstock. I wanted to give that some really nice texture. So I'll let that dry, and here I'm going to move on to some Copic Coloring. I used Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp out this girl twice onto some Neenah cardstock. Memento Tuxedo Black ink is my preferred choice whenever I'm going to be doing any Copic coloring. So I'm by no means an expert, but I did leave my process in just so you can see how I color. I generally use 3 different shades of whatever color I'm using, and I will mix those together to create a little bit of shading. I'll start by taking the lightest shade, or sometimes I'll even go 1 shade lighter and use a 4th color just to get the area that I'm working with sort of wet so that things will blend better. Then I go from darkest to lightest, so I'll first put in my shadows and then I'll move to my next color, and I sort of blend that out so that you can't see, you know, sort of the edge of where one color is going into the next color. And then I'll take that third and usually last color and I'll blend out the rest of it. So that gives me some shadows and some highlights, and it works for me, but there are so many different ways to use Copics, and like I said, I'm by no means an expert. So here you'll see I'm using that process to do both of their skin tones as well as then the towels that they're wearing. Okay, so here you'll see I went ahead and fussy cut out both of those girls, and then I used my die cut to cut out the masks. Now, when I ran these through the die cutting machine, it kind of squashed all of my texture, so I will fix that later. And then just a word of caution if you do have this stamp and die set. When I placed the girl on my Misty, I must have somehow stretched her sort of out of alignment so she would not measure up with the coordinating die cut, which is fine. I went ahead and fussy cut it, but I would suggest if you're going to use it, put your die down first, place the stamp inside the die in your Misty, and then use the door to pick up the stamp. That way you know it's going to work with the coordinating die. For the background here, I'm going to use one of the scrapbooking papers that I purchased. One side has the cucumbers on it, and then this other side has the pretty blue and white stripe. I thought those cucumbers went perfect with the spa day theme. So I used my Blueprints 32 frame die to cut out that background, and then I'm going to use the opposite side with the strip that's left over, and I'll place that along the bottom. And that strip measures 1.5 by 4 inches. I'm using some multi-matte medium to attach both the mask to the girls, and then I use some Nuvo glue to attach the girls to the background there, and I just slid them underneath, just underneath that border so you wouldn't see the white on the bottom of the pieces that I trimmed out. Here I've got an extra piece of this Cool as a Cucumber cardstock, and I've stamped on that the sentiment "Relax, we're in this together" using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. This strip measures 1 1/8 by 4.5 inches after it's trimmed. I'm just going to use some ATG, and I'll place that on top of the blue and white stripe, and then I'll trim off the excess. For the inside of the card, I'm using a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I pulled the sentiment "Go Be Brave." I'm going to stamp that using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And then to add just a little bit extra in there, the Spa Day stamp set comes with some cucumber images, so I'm adding 3 of those underneath that using Lawn Fawn Freshly Cut Grass. I'll attach that to the inside of the card using my ATG gun. And here I'm coming back, I'm going to fix the texture on those masks. So I'm just creating a little bit more of this dyed texture paste, and then I've got some brushes. They're really tiny little sort of felt tipped brushes, and I think they're used to actually apply like glue for false eyelashes, but they work really great for when you're trying to do really small detailed things. So I'm using one of those, and I'm just going to spread this texture paste around the top of both of these, and then I sort of used my finger to pat it down a little bit, and then I roughed it up a little bit more just to get that texture. And you'll see in a second here, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I did get some great texture. There you go. And that will complete card number 1. Okay, so I know card number 1 was pretty detailed and took a while, but the next 4 cards are going to be much quicker, I promise. What I've done here is I've taken 3 of the cut aparts and put those together to create a sentiment that reads, "Hello friend, make yourself feel at home, stay a while." And I'm just using my trimmer there to make sure that all of these are the exact same size. They ended up measuring 2 inches by 1.5 inches. And then I've got some MFT blue raspberry cardstock here. I'm going to use my ATG gun, and I'll attach those just so I can get about a 1/16 of an inch border around all 4 of the edges. And then I'll go back to my trimmer and I'll trim these down. So final measurements for each of those are 1 5/8 inches by 2 inches. Okay, so for the base of the card, I wanted to use this beautiful floral paper. I think this might have been my favorite paper that came in the pack. And what I'm going to do is place that directly on the card base. I just wanted to leave a little bit of the pink peeking out of the bottom. This ended up measuring 3 by 5.5 inches since I stuck it directly on the card base. So I'll place that down there using my ATG gun, and then I will go ahead and trim off the excess. Actually, as I'm looking at that, it might be 1.25 inches or closer to 1.5 inches, but just sort of a 2/3, 1/3 of the card base is what I ended up doing. So there I'm just trimming off the extra, and then I'm going to take those 3 cut aparts and I'll pop those up using some Scotch foam tape. So I'm just going to place those cut apart sort of half on, half off of the floral paper, and once I'm happy with the alignment, I'll go ahead and place them down. So you'll see in a minute here, I'm going to pull in an inside panel that I created on my Cricut. And I went with the sentiment, the Wi-Fi password is. I thought this would work really well. Maybe a friend is coming to visit and they're going to be getting in late at night and you'll be asleep, so you're leaving a key under the mat. But you know they're still going to want to wind down after their trip, so this gives them the info they need in a pretty card. I had my Cricut cut out a panel that is 4 by 5.25, and I used the font Awesome in size 30. Here I just added a 1/2 inch stripe of that same floral pattern paper across the bottom, and then I did take that over to my die cutting machine and used my Blueprints 32 frame die to get a nice clean edge around that. I placed it on the inside using some ATG gun, and that will complete card number 2. For card number 3, I'm going to use those 2 pattern papers to create a gift box that I'm going to put on the front of the card. So for a background, I'm using a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5.25, and then I'm taking this striped and floral paper and I'm going to trim this down. This is going to be the base of my box. So I've got this, it's going to be 3 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall. And then the pink polka dot paper is going to be in my box lid. So I'm trimming this down. It ends up being 3.5 inches wide, and then I really just went by the polka dots. I wanted to have 3 of those for my box lid, so when I trimmed that down, it ended up being about 1 inch wide. And here I'm just popping up all of these elements using some Scotch foam tape, and then I'll go ahead and take my box top and place that on top of the box bottom. Now I'm gonna spare you my bow tying skills because it always takes me a while, but I grabbed from my stash a sort of orangish yellow baker's twine, and I'm just gonna cut off a length of that. What I ended up doing was I made a knot at the top of the box lid, and here I'm using my Crop-A-Dile to just poke a hole in that cut apart tag. So I made a knot and then I threaded the tag on and then tied it into a bow. So once I had that finished, I decided I wanted to do an extra piece of that baker's twine just to make the ribbon look a little bit thicker. It was a bit difficult to see with all that's going on there on that pattern paper. So I've laid that across the front, and I'm peeling away the backing here on the foam tape, and I'll just wrap that around and secure it on top of the tape. Then I'm going to place some additional foam tape behind the box lid just to make sure that everything is nice and even before I place it down on the card front. I did then go ahead and actually secure the bow as well as the strands using some glue dots, but again, I'm going to save you all of that fiddling. For the inside, I'm again using a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I'm going to use the sentiment, "This is your year." I'm stamping that with my Simon Says Stamp Intense black ink. And then I wanted to add a little bit of extra on the inside, so I'm using this leftover striped paper. This measures about 1.5 inches. I'm just going to add that along the side of the panel, and then I'll trim off the excess. And here I'll go ahead and place that on the inside using my ATG gun. And that will complete card number 3. Okay, so this is a little bit of a repeat from the Simon Says Stamp card kit, but I wanted to create another one of these flower wraps, and I know some people don't have the die, so here is a way that you can go ahead and create it yourself. I trimmed out a piece of craft cardstock to 4.5 by 4.5 inches, and then there you can see I held the paper more like a diamond, and I folded one edge over just so that the point would be nice and straight at the bottom, and then I creased that with my bone folder, and then I took the other side and folded that over to match. Now I did have a little bit of overlap where that first piece folded back. You could trim that off if you wanted to, but I didn't think it was too bulky after I used my bone folder, so I just left mine in there. Here I've got a couple pieces of the ephemera that I just put together to create a bouquet, and I'm going to stick those down with some ATG gun. I added a little bit more ATG on the back of the flower wrap, and here I'm taking some mint baker's twine. I'm just going to wrap that around a few times. I think I ended up doing 4 or 5 times just to get a nice thick band of that coloring there. And then I'll tie that into a knot. Off to the side there you'll see I have a tag that says thanks, and I just went ahead and again used my Crop-A-Dile to poke a hole at the top of that. Then I'll go ahead and take the tag and I will put that on one of the strands, and then I'll just tie that into a bow. I'm going to take this then and I'll use my ATG gun to attach it to the top of the card base. Now mine did stick a little bit over the edge, and I thought this was the correct size to use to match with the size of the flowers in the ephemera. So I'm just going to trim off the extra. That doesn't bother me. I think you can still clearly tell what this is, even without the point at the bottom. So I'm just trimming that off. And here for the inside of the card, I'm again going to use a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I went with the sentiment, "Lucky me to have a friend like you," and I'm stamping that using Lawn Fawn Minty Fresh ink. As I mentioned, this floral paper really was my favorite that came in the paper pad. So I'm going to use the most of what's left of that, and I'm just going to add a strip of that across the bottom here. It measures just about 2 inches. I trimmed off the excess there, and I'll attach it on the inside using my ATG gun. And that will complete card number 4. For card number 5, I'm going to use this black and white striped paper, and I'm just trimming out a background using my MFT Blueprints 32 frame die. I'll use my ATG gun to attach that to the top of my card base. And then here I'm going to do a little bit of stamp surgery. This is from the Friend Like You stamp set. It says, "Hello, my friend," but I really just wanted the hello portion of it. So I'm trimming off the comma in the bottom line there, and then I'll just add the hello. I'm stamping this on a piece of scrap Neenah cardstock, and I'm using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink to do that. I'm going to trim that down. This white portion of the sentiment ends up measuring 7/8 of an inch by 1 5/8 of an inch. And then I'll back that using some leftover of the same cardstock that I'm using for the base there. So the final measurement ends up being 1 1/8 of an inch by 1 7/8 of an inch. Off to the side there, you'll see I've got some ephemera pieces. There's a single orange and then also a bowl full of oranges. I'm going to take all of these elements and I'll pop them up using some Scotch foam tape. And then I'll position these down on the card front. I did strategically place that bowl so that the bottom would be on one of the black stripes just to ground it a little bit more. You can easily tell what it is. And then I'm going to place the orange in front of the bowl. I did add an additional piece of foam tape just to make sure that everything was nice and even. And then I'll attach the hello up at the top. So again, I was trying to figure out what kind of a sentiment I could put on the inside of this card. I ended up going back to my Cricut and I had it cut out a panel that measures 4 by 5 1/4 and it write the sentiment, "Orange, you glad we're friends." So I used the same font that I used on the previous panel, which is called Awesome, and it's size 30. Now it just so happened that there was an orange included in that spa day kit. So here I am taking some Lawn Fawn fake tan ink and just stamping that on the inside for a little something extra. I'll attach that using my ATG gun, and that will complete card number 5. Here is a quick look back at our cards from today. Additional photos as well as a full list of supplies can be found at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.